Hello, my name is Elaine Miller-Karras, and this is Resiliency Within. I want to let you all know that we're also live on Facebook at the Resiliency Within Facebook page. And if you'd like to contact me, you can send me an email at elaine@resiliency-within.com. So we have a little change in our show today. And I just want to let you know that my dear friend, Wendy Flick, is joining me. She is the international coordinator for the trauma resiliency model. And the show that was scheduled today with Brooklyn Rainey, we hope to reschedule at a future time. So Wendy and I have been working very closely together really for close to 20 years. I first met her in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And through a series of events, I was invited to go to Nairobi, Kenya, when Wendy was working with the Pond Foundation, and you were working with Equality Now as well,
Yes,
trying to bring attention to women in Africa who were dealing with female genital mutilation. So it was one of the first times that it was the first time I went to Africa. And I was happy I could take my daughter as my assistant. And I know that experience changed her life. But I have much gratitude towards Wendy for not only inviting me to go to Africa, but for the associations that we've had since then. So after she had left the Pond Foundation, she went off to Boston, Massachusetts to get her master's it was the Kennedy School, is that right? At Harvard University. And then she began working at Unitarian Universal Service Committee. And she knew about the models that we have brought forth in the world and the power of them for healing. So she, along with her colleague, Tema Clay, said, can you put together some projects for us? And really the first project that we shared together was in Haiti. And we'll talk a little bit more about that because we learned so much from the Haitians, from the amazing resilience of those folks. Wendy can speak Creole, and she certainly has helped me many times when we were literally in crisis situations in Haiti. But we also have been, she coordinated projects in Nepal, Tanzania, the Philippines. I mean, it goes on and on. The amount of time that we've spent together internationally, I think, has really changed and transformed both of us. And I'm hoping that she'll talk a little bit about that. But let's see, I'll say it's on February 24th. We had a scheduled meeting with our colleagues at EdCamp Ukraine. EdCamp Ukraine is an educational organization within Ukraine that has, I think they have over 35,000 teachers that are members of EdCamp Ukraine. And they have launched a very important project there that's called Sea Learning. We've had people from Sea Learning on the show over the last year and a half. And that is an amazing program that was inspired by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but it's to bring ethical and compassionate learning to our world's children. And I think what's so important about that is, for me, it was important because I was a senior consultant and I was so humbled to be asked to be a part of that. But what I didn't know then and that I know now is that chapter 2 is really is the community resiliency model, their resiliency skills. And because they're as part of Sea Learning, that means that Ukrainians were learning about the model long before the sadness and horror of the war that started on the 24th of February. So quickly, we said to Wendy, we have a new project, and will you coordinate what's has now called the Ukrainian Humanitarian Resiliency Project. So that's the name of the project that we launched through the Trauma Resource Institute that many of you know that they are a sponsor. So over the last, let's say, 4 days in February, 31 days in March, and we're on day 11 here, with the exception of 2 days, we have been offering daily support meetings to Ukrainian teachers, parents, community leaders, people that are within Ukraine, outside of Ukraine, dealing with how in just a short period of time, their lives have been turned upside down and displaced. We have learned so much. And also for the Trauma Resource Institute, this is a paradigm shift. We've been to so many places after conflicts, earthquakes, typhoons, mass shootings, but this is the first time that through our association with EdCamp and a wonderful man named Alexander Elkin, who's also inspired bringing sea learning to Ukraine, that we could do this during war. We hate that war exists. We want peace. I know the Ukrainians want peace, but because of this, we have been able to do something we've never done, which makes the offering of our wellness skills accessible. We already know they're affordable, but they are so transportable. And also that in really within 24 hours, we adapted our PowerPoints and we translated them in Ukrainian so that we could deliver them in real time to the people of Ukraine. And I have to say very proudly, we were having a conversation, Wendy and I, with them day before yesterday, and they've told us that close to 80,000 views have happened on their EdCamp Facebook page of the offerings that we've had. So I have to say, Wendy, have we ever been able to impact that many people within a short period of time? So I know I could go on, but I want Wendy to say something because she's really been so critical in making this happen. Because I want to say she has been the only person in our organization that has been at every single meeting. So I have a deep bow to you for that, Wendy. You have given up much of your life to do this. And I know that you, like our organization, like myself and so many volunteers that we've had, are so committed to helping people heal during conflict. And we have fallen in love with Ukrainians. Let's just face it. We feel like we're Ukrainians now, whether we have Ukrainian blood or not. So Wendy, over to you. Give us your impressions and ideas of what's happened.
Wow, so much to unpack, but it has really been just such an honor and such a sacred space, I feel like, because we are sitting here in a position of relative privilege in our homes in the United States. But for these couple of hours at a time every day, we do the best we can to share their reality. I know you can't really, but we really tried to go there and embrace the pain, the suffering, what's going on with them, and help them with these wellness skills. And to me, it's almost miraculous the feedback we get from them. They say it's just a lifeline for them. I mean, they're in the middle of war. I remember Anya was she's one of the EdCamp members, and she was on the call every day for the first 10 days or 2 weeks. She was in a shelter doing the calls from in the shelter. And it's just I just it's hard to even find the words for how much they inspire me and how much I respect them. And Natalia, the translator, has also been on all of the meetings but two, and she has had sirens going off in the background. And I mean, it has just been such a humbling experience. But also, as Elaine said, I mean, this is new territory for us. As much international experience as TRI has had, it's always been post-disaster. And part of that is because we had to write the grants and find translators and things like that. But one of the odd gifts that came out of COVID pandemic.
The odd gifts is right.
Well, I'm just saying,
It is.
that helps me in these times of chaos, is to remind myself that in the past, odd gifts often emerge. And so it kind of helps.
This is the what else is true that we talk about, right?
Exactly,
What else is true?
So that keeps me in my own resilience zone, even with the horrors that we are hearing about and witnessing. But at the same time, it's just miraculous that we got to this space. We literally started the webinars within 48 hours of when the bombings started. And that just boggles my mind that there wasn't any gap in time. We didn't let them down. And that's the commitment you're talking about, not letting them down.
Yeah. And I think we all feel that way. We'll get up whatever time we need to get up in the morning because we're in different time zones, and we will make sure that we're there because, it's been a very odd experience too, because we've been in this odd, what I call like the bubble of war for these few hours a day. And then we pivot back into life in America without war for most of us. I mean, I don't want to minimize the fact that we know that people live in parts of America that have so much violence as well. But I think it's been a very powerful, sacred experience for me, and one where I feel humbled that we have been able to provide this. And the other thing, Wendy, I just want to say for people that are listening, like when Wendy would help us put projects together, and there was an event that happened in wherever it was, we'd have to think about, okay, who can go? Do they have passports? We have to get insurance if there's anything that happens over there. Is it safe to go? Because sometimes we were always, is it safe? But certainly it's not safe to be in Ukraine right now. So that safety issue may have prevented our nonprofit from responding. But then we'd have to say, how do we get the money? And not only do you get the money, but you also, when you do international response work like we have, and even work within our own country, you have to have people that are sponsoring you to come into the country, because just showing up sometimes, and we've seen that, is not the best way. And sometimes people that just show up take away from much needed services that people need when there is a disaster. So I'm just thinking all the things, the logistics coordinator, Wendy, that you and I have collaborated upon over the years, and how this is different. Do you think you can talk a little bit about that? Because I think we need to elaborate upon how this is really a paradigm shift.
Yeah, and there are also common denominators that jump out too. As you were
Yes.
saying that, the common denominators are the relationships. Because as we did after the Haiti earthquake, we had a prior relationship with some of the people on the ground, some of the strong organizations like MPP. But, and in this case, fortunately, we had already established the relationship with EdCamp. And so the relationship, that part is
Really.
hard to imagine doing it without, truthfully.
And I think that's when you talk about systems change, and you talk about how do we as a world community think about, we really think that our model, the community resiliency model, is really about scalability, skills that really help with mental health, not only during but after disaster. Not only do we think that, we now have research that is really supporting that from really eminent centers like Emory University, Loma Linda University, and many other folks that are really doing research about our models. So when we think about that, the scalability of mental health skills, it really does, I'm kind of awestruck about what has happened, right? Because I would never have imagined that would be, but we already had a relationship.
Yeah.
So those of you who may be thinking about, oh, I have a great idea and I want to bring something to Ukrainians, individuals too, how do I get there? How do I get anywhere where there's a conflict, right? Is that there has to be some relationship for those individuals. Because I was thinking, gosh, we didn't do this when the Syrian conflict happened. Right now the Uyghurs are experiencing so much regarding the genocide that's happening. And now my brain is like expanding, going, well, how can we do what we've done here? But it's relationship, right, Wendy? Because I think you had relationships, Satema had relationships, and certainly the Unitarian Universal Service Committee had relationships as well.
Yeah, that's correct. And that said, especially in a crisis, I'm sure when you landed in Thailand, you didn't necessarily know very many people, but this is such an accessible model. It's both and. It's fantastic if you have the relationship, you're a step ahead. But if you don't, and you're showing up with a good heart, with simple, accessible skills, such as the CRIM skills, that become so apparent so quickly to people. Because it's not, we talk about neuroscience, but this is accessible neuroscience. You don't have to memorize all the parts of the brain and things like that. For people who are curious, they can learn that part, but all they really want is to feel better. And that we can bring, and that helps build relationship and trust much more quickly than less accessible models.
Well, and I think that we've heard that, maybe what we can also highlight a little bit. I think, we always, when we have our meetings, first of all, we have a 30-minute pre-meeting with our team, because our team is fluctuating because they're volunteer trauma therapist and community resiliency model teachers. And we always have a pre-meeting because oftentimes we'll get questions about an issue that people are dealing with. So people are constantly kind of pushing questions to EdCamp Ukraine. And then we're actually getting to the point now where we're having theme days. Today was a theme day that we did this morning that was about children. And maybe we can talk a little bit about the questions that came up today. But I have to say, I was thinking there afterwards in our after meeting, because we always debrief, because we also are supporting our therapists, because they're also in this bubble of war, and things that we hear and that we see, like when our wonderful translator, Natalia, all of a sudden we heard the sirens. All of a sudden we see something in her, she's looking up, and all of a sudden she says, I have to go. we don't know what that means. Fortunately, within about 5 minutes, she goes, "Oh, I'm in a safer space right now." Now, it was in the hallway of her home. That didn't seem quite safe to me, but that was safer to her, right? Because she's not by windows. Sometimes if there's the explosions, right, the windows end up being objects that fly through the air that cause a lot of harm to people. So she was in a hallway and she was back and she didn't want to stop. We had other translators that we have from America but she says, no, this is my job right now. This is what she feels she wants to do because it's like a mission, right? Don't you think that with her?
Yeah,
Wendy?
absolutely. And one of the remarkable things about her, as long as we're talking about Natalia, is she did know a little bit about the C learning and the sort of basic ideas of the CRIM skills. But boy, has she become an expert through translating this. And you can tell she's picking up on those nuances. And if there's anything we forgot to put in, she'll say, "Do you want me to also mention sense the pleasant sensations and things?" She always slips in those extra little brilliant things. And you can see her as she's translating. She uses the hand model for the brain even if we haven't asked her to. Have you noticed that?
I've noticed that.
You can
Yes.
even track her and her nonverbal ability. She's just become a trainer.
She has. And this is so one of the things we're always saying, track sensations. Many times people start to cry and I'll say, well, just notice your tears and the warmth of tears. Well, today, Anna, we call her, she has so much wisdom. Anna was thanking our team at the end. And she said she was just expressing her gratitude kind of in a deeper way, don't you think,
Yeah,
Wendy,
I
than
got
usually she
yeah.
does? So I started tearing up, but I didn't say anything about it. But then all of a sudden, Natalia goes, Elaine, are those tears in your eyes? And I thought, oh my goodness, there you have
You
it.
can't get away with
Yeah,
anything.
I got the teacher has, it's like the student has become the teacher, right? So
Exactly. It was
she's
beautiful.
noticing. And of course, these were it was gratitude tears. They weren't sorrowful tears
Yeah.
that we could, it was kind of the expression of what we've been able to do in this short period of time.
Well, that, Elaine, and also I think the topic for today being children and teachers, I
Yes.
think that really struck home with all of us. Both of my parents were teachers, and I just witnessed from a very young age how much extra. I mean, everybody works hard at their job, but there's just some kind of. I just have a soft spot in my own heart for how teachers become like surrogate parents and really care on such a deep level, and just to be able to support them with the wellness skills as well as the children that they're working with it blew my mind today. It was just really beautiful.
Well, maybe we can talk about, I'm going to share the second question that was asked of us, and maybe we can talk a little about that, because I think it'd be good for our audience to know we're getting all sorts of questions on so many different ways. Questions about, I'm afraid I'm going to be raped. I'm afraid to be tortured. We know that we've heard that up to 20% of people in the areas that have had a lot of the Russian invasion, 20% of women have been raped. I mean, that's a horrible number. We've been able to address that. People have shared with us that they were thinking about killing themselves and throwing themselves off a balcony because of afraid of being captured. So these are all questions that we can deal with in real time. And I know our audience may be listening going, oh my, these are really difficult questions. Yes, they're difficult questions. But I think also when we talk about the response, they're in real time now. Person is having that fear. We're not having to wait. Of course, we're on Zoom. There's been an average of anywhere between, let's say 600 individuals viewing this all the way up to 3,000. I think one had 4,500 views afterwards. So we're not seeing everybody that we're talking with, but we're hearing back and we're getting references back about how much it's helping them. We're also trying to support by letting them know of the therapists that we have heard are offering sessions in Ukrainian, and we put their names and numbers in the chat box so that they can have support after our meetings. So it is something that is, it's kind of hard to negotiate. And also, we also want to make sure we're providing support after the fact, which is not always easy during a time of war. And also, that's also with the assumption that a person would talk to a therapist. And we know that how many places have we gone in the world where there haven't been therapists, or if they've had them, people are not psychologically oriented to go to.
Well, I'm recalling after the Haiti earthquake that one in the hospital in Ench, she was serving a region of one person with, a social work background. I want to say it was more than 20,000, easily over
Well, I
20,000.
think she would say 60,000. I remember her talking to us. She goes,
I just remember the
I'm
number
the only
blew my mind.
psychologist for 60,000 people.
Yeah.
So how can you possibly do that? That's why we have to think about scalability. But when we think about the second question, let me just bring this up. So the teacher said, I offer online classes for Ukrainian students and kids and I don't know even who's going to show up every day. Some of the kids she doesn't know. Every time someone is sharing their war-related fears, what is the best way to respond to them? I'm afraid I won't be able to gather myself when listening to these stories, or that there will be too many of them, but still they cannot be banned. What is the best strategy to handle this, given the online lessons are so short in time? And do I allow some designated time for this? So do you want to talk a little bit about how we responded to it? Wendy and I can add in.
Well, yeah, and it's part of the beauty of having these teams of people, all with their own viewpoints, their own experiences. So when we bring in the support team, we intentionally choose them when we can for the topic that's coming up. So we just had a brilliant team to address this, and I really feel like it by approaching it from all those different lenses, it fleshes out the picture so that it can really help quite a
Yes.
bit. But also it always, when sometimes I'm taken aback by a question, I just remind myself it's all comes back to the body, and the wisdom in the body, and the wisdom in the nervous system, and the goals of the nervous system are to help us survive. And that the teacher, I remember one of the first things we did was to post the links to those 4 webinars, so that the teacher herself would be able to study the skills and help herself stay in her own resilient zone, and therefore be better able to help the kids. But also, even as she starts the lesson, prioritizing resourcing and grounding and resiliency questions at the very beginning, before she even starts any of the lesson plan, because the lesson plan is secondary when these kids are in such a traumatized state,
Right,
and
because what happens to the prefrontal cortex if the kids are traumatized? Can they really take in new information? And what we've learned is though it's difficult for them to do so. So if they can start in a more resource space,
Mhm.
they can actually be able to take in the information in a different way. So go on, Wendy. What
Yeah, no,
else?
they can take in the information, and also they learn very critical skills, because after all, the teacher might be with them for 1 hour a day or so, but the skills that they're learning about the resourcing, they have that as the day gets difficult, when they get out of school and they're at home and something happens, or maybe their younger sibling gets, activated by something. They can say, hey, I learned something today. Maybe you'd like to go push against a wall. It really makes me feel better when I did that before. Do you want to try
Yes.
it with me? So they can become peer-to-peer support for each other, both in the online classroom setting and in their own family. And that in itself becomes a resource, because that empowers them to know that they can do something when they start feeling out of control, when the war is really getting to be upsetting to them. They can do something. They can change what's going on in their own mind by
Right.
changing.
And I think that those were part of our responses. I think the other part is that we also addressed the teacher and how difficult that would be for her, that
Yeah.
here she also is experiencing the war, and she's trying to be present for those children. And one of the things that was pointed out by one of the other educators, Anna, was that oftentimes when there is an online learning environment, that you may have children in the classroom that are in Ukraine in areas that are being shelled daily. You may have children that are in another country that are coming from the other country to their online learning. You also may have children that have for over 40 days throughout the time of the shelling have lived in underground shelters. So you have all of these children with different experiences. And so here you have one teacher trying to meet the needs of all these children. So we talked about her and just the need for her to also utilize these skills, like you've already said, Wendy, that she can go to put that oxygen mask on herself and that to help. But we really wanted to affirm that what she's experiencing is, you know, is extraordinary, and that teachers aren't, and here's our module, if you're learning to be a teacher, on how to bring um, education to children who are also living through war. So I think that's the other part of what we are doing and experiencing, is helping and learning from also our Ukrainian colleagues what is helping them, what is helping their children. And we're adding our little ingredients from this trauma lens and trauma informed perspective and resiliency informed perspective. And they are telling us how helpful it is to get this information, which was one of the reasons why I was crying right earlier, because of those gratitude tears of how much it meant. So believe it or not, we're almost ready for our break, Wendy. So I just want our audience to know we are going to come back. We're going to also share another story with you that is so dear, about a mother who had to go to Portugal with her son, and some of the struggles she has being a displaced person and her worries for her child. So we want to bring you both these lenses today when we come back. And Wendy, it's so lovely to speak with you. And I just want our listeners to know that she's going to be coming back with more of her wisdom. Um, I want to just say something. I know we only have about a minute or so left before the break, but I'm so fond of Wendy Flick, because I often feel like if it wasn't for her, maybe I wouldn't be doing this work. I think we both feel a certain kind of cross section of gratitude for each other. But it is important to know that when, I think never to underestimate the power of the relationships we have in our lives. And that sometimes there's a relationship we may have, and maybe we don't talk for a number of years, but those relationships matter. And I really feel that way about Wendy and what we have jointly with not only with the two of us, but with our amazing volunteers and employees of TRI have been able to do in these last, gosh, I guess it's getting to be 50 days now since the war started. So we'll be back in a few minutes, and Wendy will continue to share her wisdom with us, and we'll continue to give you some more information about the Ukrainian Humanitarian Resiliency Project. I always have to say the right order of those words. So we'll be back in just a couple minutes, and we'll further our discussion with Wendy Flick. Welcome back. I'm here with Wendy Flick today. She is the international coordinator from the Trauma Resource Institute, and she is coordinating our Ukrainian Humanitarian Resiliency Project. I said that faster this time, Wendy. So we're going to continue with our discussion about how we both have been working over the last more than 50 days now in bringing this project forward. And we've been both stunned, I think, because of all the work that we've done on the ground after disasters, that we've actually been able to accomplish this during a disaster. And so we were just talking about one of the questions that came from one of the teachers. And I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Wendy, to what we were talking about.
Do you mean question 2 or question 1?
We'll go to question 1 soon, but in terms of what we were just talking about regarding one of the teachers, is there anything else we should say about her, that question and what we came up with? Because I think we came up with a lot of different ideas for the teacher. And we actually had a teacher from a school district in Atlanta that gave some great ideas too of what she's done. So I don't know if there's anything more you want to say.
I loved what she shared, Catherine from Woodward.
Yes.
And I loved what she shared. Now, it's in a real classroom, an actual physical classroom, but I felt like that was inspiring to have her with the video background of her own classroom and the chalkboard and things, because I think for the teachers that are longing to get back to a real classroom, I can imagine, I felt in my own body that it felt like that could be resourcing for them. But also, she has a brilliant thing that she's done to help her own kids resource. At the beginning of each day, they will think of something good that happened to them. It can just be a little thing, anything whatsoever, anything they're grateful for, or something good that happened to them. Write it on a little piece of paper, and they put it in a glass jar. And then anytime they're feeling like they need a little bit of a boost, anybody can go to that jar, reach in and pull out a piece of paper and read something helpful. to them.
Yeah, and I think it was also something that was helpful for them. It could be a person or a place or a thing
Mhm, mhm.
that maybe uplifted them. That
Yeah.
was, I think, the other thing that she had. And so we were talking about that because that's in a living classroom. But what if you're on Zoom? And so then, of course, she goes, oh, you can put it in chat. And so then people can even save chats if they want, if they have a computer, they can look at those later. Or even while you're in the classroom, if you find yourself getting bumped out of your, what we call the resilient zone or your zone of well-being, then you could get back into your resilient zone. But I think one of the things that I thought was important was having a structure. We believe that it was important that the children have an opportunity to be able to say something about their fears, if and not to avoid them, but to maybe have a structure in the classroom where you start with resourcing and then say, does anybody have anything else they want to share? But we also encouraged her that as the children were sharing, to integrate questions. And we've learned this from being really on the ground during and after disasters. And that these are questions that are like, well, so what is helping you the most now? Do you remember the moment that you got to the safer place? And maybe the safer place is underground, but questions that are what we call strength-based questions that could be integrated into the, let's say the fearful or traumatic experience, that also reminds the child that there's other things that were also true about what happened. And so we also have learned that when you do that, that our lens as human beings tend to go to the more sometimes the more positive aspects. Oh, I remember that person came up to me and gave me a stuffed animal. Things like that tend to start then creeping up to the top. It's almost like once things get cleared from the experience of feeling the trauma, that you can also remember those things that were beneficial to you. So we did talk about that as well. So again, when we're meeting with, at this point, we're answering these questions from a teacher, we're trying to have this wonderful tapestry of trauma experts and crim skills teachers helping us with giving the response. So is there anything more you wanted to add to that? And we'll go to the next question, Wendy. I thought it'd be probably good to talk about the
Well,
next
I
one.
remember because the teacher herself didn't yet know any of the crim skills, but even in that short time, I felt like we were able to teach her a few skills, and even talking about, I think it was Susan that was talking about how if she learns to track her own body and the child is speaking about a story and she notices herself getting a little bit distressed, she knows it's time to take a little pause, little resiliency pause, go back to, where they began with resourcing and the resiliency questions, and then sort of using her own body as a mirror to know when to do that pause and to help bring down the tension again.
Well, and I think it's that self-evaluation piece that we have found is so important, that is called, the fancy term for it is interceptive awareness, right? Because we always kind of like, weave in that in neuroscience nuggets. But people who have this awareness, that studies have been found, have better what we call affect regulation, can manage their emotions better, and also have better impulse control. So there you go, the value of that, not only for the teacher, but also for the children. Because the
Yeah.
teacher, sometimes when you're a teacher had explained to me, she goes, oftentimes she goes, I'm not in trauma, and my kid, let's say there's been a domestic violence episode in their family, so I can help them. But what makes, I think, this is also different is that the teachers are also experiencing more, as well as the students. So it's really happening to both. So things that we can contribute to both makes, I think, a big I think makes a big difference.
Mhm, mhm.
So this next question we want to share with you is the second question. This is the other question that we addressed today, and it was from a parent who said, "I fled to Portugal with my kid. We don't know anyone here. My son is 9. Recently, he asked me to get him a toy so that he could have a friend. He also he only meets his friends online. He really lacks communication because I have not yet got him into school here. My heart is breaking. How do I support him?"
Mhm.
So I think this question is probably being repeated over and over by possibly millions of individuals from just this one conflict in Ukraine. And also, we also want to just, I guess, underscore again that we know there's conflicts in many parts of the world that we haven't had the opportunity to intervene upon like we have here. So one of the things, and I'll start out with Wendy, because Susan Reedy is a licensed marriage family therapist, and she's been working with us for so many years. And she also helped to develop our family resiliency program within the Trauma Resource Institute. But she's a play therapist. And the first thing that came out of her mouth, which I just loved, was really uh, affirming the mother that her child was doing something that children do, because children speak through play. And that's why we have play therapists, right? Or expressive arts therapists as well. And so the fact that this little boy um, asked for a toy was also really speaking to his well-being and his resilience, that he knew that he needed something. And so the mom was, I think, concerned that, oh my goodness, because he asked for a toy. But then one of the therapists said, oh, in my private practice, she says, I see an 8-year-old boy, and he every time we meet, he's in his room showing me all the toys and what they mean to him. But then there's the sadness of realizing that many children, I think in this case, that in haste had to leave Ukraine, go to a safer part of Ukraine, or even go into a shelter or go out of the country. They couldn't take their toys with them. And so then one of our trauma therapists, Stephanie, said, oh, I want to share something that happened with my daughter. And during the pandemic, they had to move, and her daughter was experiencing something similar to this little boy. Of course, it wasn't during war, so it was a bit different. But she said, what my daughter did was she created paper dolls. And these paper dolls were very important to her. They all had names and their characters. And then there was a point, once she became more settled in her new place where she was, that she told her mom she didn't need to have the paper doll friends anymore. Because I think it's because she had made other human friends. But I think that also, I think what we all felt was that children have an amazing capacity to create toys and things. And Wendy, you brought up something from Haiti. You want to share that right now? Because you brought up a really positive memory for me about when we were working in Haiti after the 2010 earthquake.
Yeah, and it has to do with what you're talking about with the tremendous resiliency of kids and creativity. And in the Haiti earthquake, as most people know, there were huge numbers of people displaced out of the city, and their houses had gone down. They couldn't take anything with them. They were lucky to have escaped with their lives. But it wasn't long, Elaine. It was only a few weeks after the earthquake. We were out there
I
at
know
the
we were.
camp in the rural area, and these little boys had found empty plastic water bottles, and they collected the little lids and they put sticks through as axles, sort of, and then put a little string. They created little cars, and then they would have car races. They would interact with each other. They were laughing and joyful. And just coming back to that, it just reminded me, kids have that in them, and it doesn't matter what the crisis is. They as long as you can help them with a few simple skills to get back in their resilience zone, they can recreate toys. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's incredible.
And I think that's, we shared that because, may not have the resources, but there are resources that children have, because sometimes their imaginations and what they can create are greater than we adults can create. But the other
Exactly.
thing is that what was really exciting, I think, for me in this particular call was we found out that the mother was online, and she was communicating to one of the people at EdCamp. And so she told us after Susan had shared about the toys, that she shared that she felt much better knowing that actually him asking for the toy was not because there was something lacking in him, but that there was a strength in him that also came from just her care of him, that he knew that there was something that he was missing, and that he knew what he needed. And
Yeah.
then we were all just, really talk about tears in the eyes. So then the mother shared, oh, the toy that he shared that he wanted was Yoda from Star Wars. And
Mhm.
then and I, knowing that very well, most of us know Yoda, but Yoda is such a wise and compassionate being. And the fact that was the toy that he wanted. And I was reading later about the meaning of Yoda, that I guess they feel comes from Hebrew, which means warrior, but also means one who knows. And I thought, oh my gosh, what the sweetness of that little boy, maybe in knowing that in his little body, that that's what he needed at that time. I wish we could go back and tell the meaning of the word Yoda. I guess we'll have to
Yeah.
say it tomorrow. I mean, our next call, which will be on Wednesday.
Yeah.
But I think those kinds of responses that we can create in response to this mother's fear was really important. But there were lots of things that we discussed about this particular issue. Do you want to highlight any ones that come to your mind that you think are important?
Well, one thing that now I wish we had said
Yeah,
was
of course, we
imagine
can always go back,
there's
right?
always more. There's always more to be said every time, but the imagination piece, and I think we've said it on previous calls when we were talking about children, but if they don't have anything physical, if they don't have crayons and paper, if they don't have, physical materials, there are so many different games you can play with kids, imagining themselves to be an animal and what kind of animal do they want to be, and helping them learn to track as they imagine the animal and move like and they imagine the animal moving, and they can calm themselves down that way. And it's a more than a distraction. It gets them in the present moment in their body, but in an imaginative, creative, strength-based way. So I never want to underestimate the imagination either.
No,
I
and I
want to.
think, and I'm hoping that what you're hearing from us too, because we don't want to minimize the fact that the people are suffering, children are suffering. But I think what we're doing is we're not only acknowledging that and giving some ideas to help to mitigate or reduce the degree of their suffering, but also giving ideas of how to help their children in the here and now. Because I think our trauma experts, we've had child psychologists and trauma therapists who specialize in children saying, remember also that yes, the child may have gone through this, but the child has so much other qualities that you also want to continue to pay attention to. So it's not like we want to only focus on the challenges the war has brought, because we also had questions in an earlier call about sexual assault of children that's happened as a result of war and how to help them. I mean, and our responses were first, if they can, get that child medical care, because if there has been sexual assault, there can be damage to that part of the body, because their little sexual organ section is not meant for being sexually assaulted. So sometimes there has to be repairs, there can be fistulas and other things. And I know that some of this may be things that our audience hasn't been used to hearing, but we were trying to bring that kind of information and to know that so far, and there may be more, but the 23 hospitals have been destroyed. And also that means medical clinics. So that means that medical care isn't easy to get a hold of. But we are also trying to help people understand that these are kinds of things that also need to be looked at, including, being screened for sexually transmitted diseases and other things that, are horrible to think about for one's little child that may have been sexually assaulted or teenager. But I think the other part of that is we've also emphasized what else is true about this child, what other kind of components of what this child is that you also want to water and nourish, knowing that this has happened to them. And will they maybe need trauma therapy later on? They may, but at this point, we're trying to help them with skills of well-being so that children remember what else is true, but most important, the parents do as well. So the parents don't only, I think as a parent, we get so worried about our children that we can focus on the horror of this and not remember also how we can cultivate the well-being, which is also very important to do during these times. So
Yeah.
I hope people are getting the quality of the difficulty too of the kinds of questions we're getting. So over to you, Wendy. Any thoughts coming up for you right now?
Oh, yeah, a couple things. I was just thinking about the resiliency questions that we ask that can help them move away from being in survival response, because sometimes the people will arrive in a safer city and their body hasn't caught up with their mind in terms of knowing that they actually survived. So it seems like a simple thing, but sometimes that is such a powerful transformation when you ask that question, when did you know you were safer? It's like, oh my God, I did survive. And then that can be the shift and the power in that. It seems like a simple thing, but yeah.
Well, and also we have one of our therapists, Irina. She actually lives in California. She's been going to the border, the Tijuana border, where there's Ukrainian refugees that are amassing, and she's been working with some of the children and also working with the adults. And that's a question that she found has been really important. that all of a sudden it's almost like someone has poured, has also just given someone a sweet nectar to remind them, oh yes, there is that. Oh, and you can hear the parasympathetic breath and the nervous system coming back into balance, and the person coming into the present moment, which does seem to be, we always talk about present moment awareness and like mindfulness, but also in the community resiliency model, present moment awareness is done through the skills that can be done in a nanosecond. You don't have to go to a quiet space. You can do it in a present moment. And there was also one of I love the Stephanie brought this too about her daughter, that when she is feeling out of sorts, she has a little stuffed bear and she touches the ears of the bear with her hands, a sensory awareness, right? The softness and the movement of her hands. And she can see her daughter come back into balance again. And that was shared on the call today as something too that the parents can do, is using the sensory system. It's a skill we call gesturing, which is also connected to reading the nervous system, that can help in very simple ways stabilize the nervous system, even when someone's gone through something so horrific, like the images of wars, or we're talking about sexual assaults that we know are not easy, not only to live through, but to survive from, but to know that there is hope. And that's one of the things that we're trying to engender. And they're saying back to us, oh, I can experience a little bit of hope right now, even when I didn't know hope was possible. And we've heard that more than once, haven't we, Wendy?
Yeah, it's hard to describe it as a beautiful experience, but I guess it's the sacred element of it,
Sacred.
because the war is so horrific, but at the same time we have these connections where you can really see, you can almost see the tension drop. And they tell us in the chat, or they'll unmute themselves and just say, thank you. I feel like I can make it through another day now. And even if all we can do is create those moments of respite, so that it's not just up here, up here, up here, up here, or down here, but just a few moments of respite. I remember another time we shared the resourcing exercise where you pull out a photograph on your phone, and that was so powerful. It's powerful with kids and adults, but everybody held up to their camera on whatever device they were on, one of their favorite pictures. And I just remember that the laughter and everybody seeing each other's grandson or their cat or a beautiful tree out in the springtime. And it just brings that human connection back into it, as what else is true. You know, we can connect, we can care about each other here in this sacred place, you know?
And this is not, I think, I don't believe it's a benign intervention either, because we know that when we accumulate, right, stress and trauma in our lives, that there is a physiological aspect of it that's called toxic stress. We've talked about it on the show in the past, but toxic stress is physiological. And
Mhm.
when your stress hormones are part of the elegant design of the human nervous system, but they're only meant for momentary, like getting away from threat or fighting threat. But if we get our let's say our foot stuck on the accelerator of our nervous system, that means those hormones that are really meant for a short period of time are going into our system over longer periods of time. So when Wendy said about these little moments of respite, we they're reporting that they're feeling better. Many of them are feeling better as a result of these little moments of respite. I think one of the ones that comes to mind is the woman whose mother couldn't sleep. And so she taught her resourcing, and her resource was remembering when she fell in love with her husband. And she said later that was the first night when she accessed that resource. But it's not just thinking, then the parasympathetic nervous system comes into play to remember that moment of love when you fell in love. It's like it's a mind body experience, and then her nervous system could rest and she could get that first night of sleep. And you can imagine that's very difficult. Oh my goodness, Wendy, we have 3 minutes left.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
that went by so fast. I told you this would go by fast. But I want to end with a story of a woman who we have come to appreciate. Her name is Mariana. But on March 1st, 2022, in an anguished voice, she came on and said, well, my name is Mariana. My house is destroyed. My office is being shelled. I have barely escaped with my life. And her voice was shaky as we spoke with her. And we told her, and she said, my life will never be the same again. How can I ever be happy again? How can I ever have joy? And we embraced her, didn't we? And we said, can even, and she goes, and I can't share this with my family because I have to support them. And so we said to her, can you feel our support now? And we said more things to her, but what ended up happening in what was probably what, a 30-minute conversation, she said at the end, she said, oh, well, I can sense now maybe that I'm not alone. And she said, maybe it is possible. She goes, oh, I'm crying. Thank you for that. The group is helping. And maybe I can feel this is a safe space and I can feel safe here. That meant a lot to us. And I share that story of her because then she came a couple days later. We were talking about the power of music to help during these times of respite. And all of a sudden, there was a beautiful a cappella voice singing a hymn. We didn't know it was Mariana when she started to sing, but then she revealed it was her. And she said that through the course of what had happened to her in the last few days, that she had experienced, I think, a bit of hope. And it was like a miracle to her.
Mhm.
So I want to end with that. And also my great gratitude, Wendy, for you to come in to pinch hit today. Oh my gosh, my friend,
My pleasure.
talk about this project that's so dear to our heart. So I want to remind everyone to remember what else is true. If you are suffering in America or other parts of the world, or if you have a loved one in you from Ukraine, or if you're from Ukraine, remember what else is true about your life. How can you nourish this moment? What is helping you right now? Who or what is helping you? And remember that we do have this common humanity that binds all of us. And when we focus on the love and the peace that can happen with all of us, I think we have a better world, don't we, Wendy?
Mhm, mhm.
And you can reach Wendy and you can reach Wendy through the traumaresourceinstitute.com. Just go to that website and you can talk to her there. And you can reach me at Elaine at resiliencywithin.com. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you next time.